This is John King. I'm speaking with John Barnes, who's the spokesperson for Montana Attorney General Tim Fox. And I was calling because there's been a little bit of a hubbub. Of course, it's political season, and there's a little bit of a missing trail, I guess, of emails at the Attorney General's office. And people are accusing Steve Bullock of deleting his email record at the Attorney General's office. And I just was hoping you might kind of be able to explain to us what happened as far as we know, and whether or not there are new policies set for the treatment of state emails.
Well, certainly, John, and I can start with how things happen now under Tim Fox's administration. So Tim Fox has been Attorney General since January of 2013. And since then, there's been a handful of members of his executive staff, his appointed staff, who have retired or have moved on. And as you know, every statewide elected official under the law is allowed a certain number of appointees. And so these are employees who they're appointed. They're not what you would call sort of the classified permanent government employees. They come and go, and they're subject to appointment, by the Attorney General or the state auditor or the, whatever. So when an employee of the Fox administration, an appointed employee, has left, we have taken the step to ensure that every single email record that they had when they left, all the documents on their machine, their computer, have been preserved. We've taken all those things, we've put them on a server in the agency, so they're there to be searched through in response to a records request, or if we need something for agency business or a piece of litigation or whatever, it's all there. And when a classified employee leaves the agency, there's a process they go through with their supervisor to ensure that anything that needs to be preserved and handed on to the succeeding employee, that's done. Where this all originated from is a records request that we received back in early 2000 and it was early this year actually, from lawyers representing Tim Blickseth. He, as you know, he's been in litigation with the state and everything for quite a while, and he had wanted email records from the time under Attorney General Steve Bullock. Well, we knew that those email records from Attorney General Bullock and from his appointed staff didn't exist, and so I indicated that in my letter responding to Mr. Blickseth's records request. We had said, there's other records that might, because it was a pretty broad request, one of the broadest I've ever seen, and it included email records from Attorney General Bullock, and I indicated to Mr. Blickseth that those records didn't exist, and so they couldn't be searched for anything that was responsive to his request. And down the road from that, there was some press interest on that. Well, what happened to those records? And the answer to that question is we don't really know. We know a few things. We know that when the Fox administration took office, there were no email records turned over to that administration by the previous administration, from the AG or the exempt staff. They're the appointed staff, I should say. And, state employee emails, they exist in two places. First, on the state email servers managed by the Department of Administration, and then you have a very limited amount of space that you're allowed on that server, so that information needs to be archived locally onto your machine or an agency server managed by your own agency. And when Attorney General Bullock left, when his appointed staff left this office, their email accounts were terminated by the Department of Administration. That's true, but all of their email archives that were here in this agency weren't turned over to the Fox administration. And we know that those emails, there's a lot we don't know, there's a lot we do know. What we do know is that the IT staff here in the Department of Justice was never instructed to delete or preserve those email archives. We also know that they weren't turned over. They didn't seem to exist at this agency when Tim Fox took office. And so beyond that, we don't know. And there's obviously a lot of press interest in this, as you can imagine.
Now, so let me understand. When you say that Tim Fox has directed staff to preserve their emails, make sure that their personal email or state record emails are preserved, is that just an internal policy, or is that state law?
Well, the law changed in 2015. The legislature passed a bill that really kind of expanded what exactly a constitutional office holder, which would be the governor, the attorney general, the secretary of state, the superintendent of public instruction, the state auditor, and your public service commissioners, etc. What needed to be preserved, and it laid out specific instructions for how those records are to be handled. And that law took effect, I think, in October of 2015. So the law in 2013 was different than it is today. But really, when the steps that we started taking to make sure that emails were preserved, from our standpoint, was just a natural thing to do. Because when, for example, the chief of staff here, he retired from state government very early this year, and so we just preserved everything he had. And even before that new law took effect, we were preserving everything as well, just because we knew that at some point those records might be needed. They might be needed by the agency for internal management issues, things that employee had worked on that we would need to continue working on. They might be needed relative to litigation, a specific case, or they might be needed in response to a records request. So we just decided to keep everything. It seemed the logical thing to do, and to keep those kinds of records for the appointed staff is not really a burden on electronic storage, really.
Gotcha. So, okay, final question, I think. One of the things that's really confusing to us is, who deleted the emails, if they were deleted or erased? Do we have any clue?
Well, and that's not something we don't know. We don't know what happened to those records. Again, we know that the IT staff here at the Department of Justice, when Attorney General Bullock and his appointed staff left, there were no instructions given to IT to delete or preserve anything. So what happened to them is we're not able to determine that at this point.
All right. Well, hey, thanks so much for your time, John.
Well, thank you.